So you have a good solid history, and I'm wondering how you got started playing music from the beginning.
Um, Playing the saxophone or playing music?
Music.
I was always into music. I was thinking about that. I think it's my parents were into music,
Yeah.
and I remember music being around and different types of music. And when I thought, well, what different types? Folk and jazz, which seemed like quite a bit different, because there's probably maybe a classical album here or there and some pop things, but I remember that the collection around my house seemed a little bit different than most collections, most houses I was familiar with. So, well, all kinds of folk music and jazz. So anyway, I was into music from way back.
You grew up here in the Bay Area?
No, I grew up in Chicago.
Chicago. Mm-hmm. And your parents, were they musicians as well, or?
No.
Okay.
Neither one could carry a tune. That's my burden. I'm trying to learn how to do that.
Still now today, huh?
Still today.
Yeah. So when did you pick up the saxophone?
I actually, it was in college when I started saxophone. I was playing around with guitar before then. I had a little small repertoire. And then saxophone came up. Somebody just offered me one, said, "You want to buy a saxophone?" I hadn't even thought about it. And it's an interesting story because toward the end of the school year, I think I was like a sophomore, going my junior year or senior year, whatever. He said, "You want to buy this saxophone?" I said, "I don't have any money." He said, "Well, you can take it and pay me later." Wow. Okay. And so that's what it cost. My Holton alto saxophone cost me, I believe, $25. We're talking a long time ago.
Oh, when was that? Are you telling?
Let's see. I'm going to say it was summer of '66.
Okay.
Yeah. So, so that was it. So I had the saxophone, and, from then on, it was just, before I had the saxophone, I was playing a lot of air saxophone.
Really?
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, we would do that.
So would you say that playing saxophone, in retrospect, was meant to be?
Yeah, I can say that.
You know what I mean?
I can say that. I mean, I was prepared for it. I mean, I had all the moves. Everything. If I had no thought to get a saxophone, no thought. It was just a part of the timing. We get it.
Were there particular horn players that were inspiring the air saxophone to manifest?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, there was particular music I was into. Yeah. Early on, I was really into Ornette. I mean, he was my big inspiration, I would say. I was listening to Mingus, Ornette, Monk, Coltrane. I mean, they were all. Coltrane, of course, was on such a level that it's hard for him to be an inspiration because he's sort of like, he's a divinity. Whatever he did, it's like, wow. And so that, Ornette, there was a human connection for me with Ornette.
Right.
I understood what he was doing on a human level, as opposed to Coltrane on a God level. So it was who knows what he's doing.
Did you ever meet Ornette, or?
I met him briefly long time after that.
Yeah.
Ran into him once at the Keystone, and then I saw him again in San Francisco since the Keystone, I think. But it's been a while.
Yeah.
I don't really know.
So, were you still in Chicago when you got your first saxophone?
No. Well, no. I went to college on the East Coast, and so I brought it home. And that summer, I'm pretty sure it was '66 because that summer I was doing a lot of listening. It was a lot of the AACM concerts. I was going to see them, and you know, playing around with my saxophone. I was really immersed in it that summer, and from then on.
Wow. Okay. So when did you move to the San Francisco Bay Area?
68.
68. Very powerful year. Just
Yeah.
leading up to.
Yeah, there was a lot happening that year, everywhere.
Yeah.
Because I came out here in April, and it was maybe a couple weeks after Martin Luther King had been assassinated. They had the thing going on at San Francisco State that spring. It was a huge ongoing thing. And then, of course, Robert Kennedy later that year. There was a Democratic National Convention. I mean, the whole year was, well, the late 60s.
Right.
With just
Right.
lots.
And the music was pretty powerful out here as well, as far as I can remember historically.
I guess so. I mean,
Yeah. Well, you were in it to a certain extent. I mean,
I wasn't in it in the late 60s. I was not in it yet.
No.
No, because I got the horn in '66, and I unlike some folks, I put in a few years before I actually performed.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't perform anything until 70, maybe 71, 70 or 71, with Charles Tyler.
Right. Was that your first engagement with Charles Tyler? Or? Really?
Yeah, when he came out here, and he started a workshop. It was at the old Grove Street College on what is now King Street.
Oh, okay.
So I went to his workshop, and it's fine. At some point, he asked me if I wanted to be in his group or perform with him on a couple of occasions, and I was like, sure.
Did you know of any of his past history and his connections?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Well, that was close to divinity too, because I mean I was in the Albert Eiler, and as far as I was concerned, Charles Tyler and Albert Eiler, they sounded the same. I mean, to me, it was when I heard Charles play, I was like, it was the same sound. It was I recognized that that universe. So yeah, I knew about it.
So how long did you work with Charles Tyler?
I didn't do that many performances with him.
Yeah.
He I think he was on the East Coast before he came out here, and then he went back to the East Coast, probably in the early to mid '70s, and I did a few with him. It was great. It was sort of brief, and we didn't have a long connection. Sometimes I forget how, because when you talk about a mentor or somebody that helps you along, usually people are talking about somebody they were with over an extended period of time. But, it was relatively brief with Charles that I was there, but, I mean, it made all the difference in the world. First of all, I had never performed before. And second of all, I'm performing with somebody who is, for me, is connected with one of the,
Innovator, maybe, or I don't
whatever.
know. Yeah.
You could say that. Just, I mean, what I was connected with in terms of sound and where I was coming from. I mean, he was one of the sources. Let's put it that way. So that was a great way. That was a great way to start, because it was. I mean, that's where I was. Because I think for a lot of people, I mean, you're starting to play and you got ideas about performing, whatever. But a lot of times, for a lot of folks, you just take whatever comes up first, and it may not really be what you were into. But then maybe you're stuck with that for a few years, and then you find your way somewhere else or whatever. But right from the beginning, I was in the environment. Performing in an environment that I was always attuned to, that I've been attuned to for. But there was still some events that had to happen for me to really get rooted in the music. And
was it after your gigs with Charles and you get really, that was like the spark that?
Yeah, it was. So that was. I mean, that gave me some. I'm sure, gave me some belief in being able to be in the mix. but then, but what really happened, and I won't go into all the details, but what really happened was at a certain point, I was interested in starting a group with some folks, and you know, looking back at it, that's sort of a different orientation, because a lot of times people think, okay, I'm learning to play, well, who can I join with? Who will take me in? You know, I sort of, I guess, bypassed that, because with Charles, I hadn't even thought about it before he gave me the opportunity, and then I wanted to form a group, and I think wanting to form a group was that I could have only wanted to do that because I was committed to the idea of original music, so that was a big start.
Well, tell us more about that concept of original music for you, and what it means to you in the larger context of your work over the past 4 years, so to speak.
Original music?
Yeah.
Well, original music is original expression. You know, what I used to hear, what I heard, and as far as I know, it's accurate. In terms of the AACM, part of the organizing principle for that was that everybody brought original music. And in my experience, what I was into musically and what I'd seen, what I heard, the music is the freshest, was the more like what I wanted to hear when people brought their original work. Okay, yeah, because that seemed clearly a way to go. So with original compositions, you can shape them for the expression you want. I mean, that's part of what the deal is. I mean, if you go with somebody else's structure, well, then you're going to be limited in what you can say or how you can say it. If you're composing your own music, then you if there's structure, assuming if it's a composition, we have to say there's some structure, but that structure is not confining to you. It's not, it's not restrictive. And so so that's what got me into it was there was another thing going on. I mean, I've been playing so long that there've been, I'm sure, psychologically things have moved. But in the beginning, like I mentioned Coltrane, like the thought of playing anything Coltrane did, I probably didn't have that thought till after I've been performing for 10 or 15 years. It's just that some of those songs, some of the way he approached his music, some of what he did, it's like, this has been done. Why would I turn out a weaker version of something that's already been nailed? Somebody's already nailed it. What would be the point? At the same time, that didn't mean that I, as a, so to speak, apprentice in the field, didn't have something original or worthwhile to say. But it had to be in the form that I could say it. Like you can put best musician in a different genre, say, or a different structure, and it's like, well, that was okay, but nothing special, right? Because it's not their thing, So to me, that was, I really was into Albert Ayler. At the same time, Albert, he was extreme too. I mean, they're all these guys. I guess that we know them all because they're extreme. They're dedicated, they're committed to what they carved out, and they can show you things that you want to incorporate, but you still have to do it differently.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
Yeah, and that's where the composition comes in. So, it's sort of maybe your way of talking to yourself. Okay, let me create create this structure where I can maybe do all these elements. I can exercise all my influences, but I'm still doing it in a way that I know that I'm true to where I'm coming from. For instance, like I know that I have I've been into melodies, say, a lot more than some folks I've known, and so when I compose, I tend to want to do things with more melody. You know, it's I'm not, for instance, interested in framing it where it's a chordal structure.
Yeah, I've listened to your music. It actually has a very lyrical element to it. Something that not a lot of players from that past time were the extreme process, where it was all about the sheer catharsis. But I think it's important to have that personally as a horn player myself. And I noticed that that's very strong in you, that lyrical sense of melody and music.
Yeah, I'm glad you gave me the term, the catharsis, right? Because, yeah, that would be the school, I guess you could say. The Eiler school seems to be about catharsis. There's a lot of catharsis going on.
Yeah.
And I was all for that. I mean, you know, I am all for that. But there were times when it wasn't about that. I'm not 100% with catharsis. There's something else there. And yeah, you know, you have to be careful. And probably whatever you're doing, music, whatever discipline or field you're in, you have to be careful of staying true to yourself, you know, and you want to fit in, but you still say, well, I only want to fit in if I can bring this with me, you know, and it gets sort of tricky, because I remember, you know, with the group that I was with the most, the United Front, now we basically came together pretty much from the outside music perspective, I would say. When it comes together and we put it together, what I consider sort of our innovation or our, you know, what had us standing out was really sort of the combination of things that we brought to it. And some of that had cathartic elements, maybe. Some of it had this and that and the other. But it's interesting. For some people, we were avant-garde. And then I remember as one festival we were booked, and they did the mainstream United Front. I'm thinking, where did they get mainstream from? You know, it's like people are so set on their own frame of reference that, you know, when it's not quite that, then they get a little glib with categories and labels.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about labels is that's the big problem.
Yes, speaking of words, you also incorporate spoken word poetry in your work. And when was that always something you've always worked with, or did that kind of come in over time while you were a performing musician?
Well, the first group I worked with that I helped create was called Brujeria. And that was with Carlton Hoffman, Richard Wood, and George Sams. And the bass player, and another bass player, a different one. We had a hard time sticking with folks, but we've worked with a lot of good folks over the course of time. But anyway, I wanted to bring poetry in. I don't remember all of my motivation for wanting to bring it in. Well, first of all, in the beginning, I was not bringing my poetry in. But I wanted to bring words and text in. Like, for instance, in our album, actually, Brewery didn't put out an album, but I found it worked. That's the main thing. I found that I'm not sure why I wanted to in the very beginning, but after we did it, it was clear it worked, and so it was no reason not to. And what I found, because Brewery was probably more on the cathartic part of the spectrum. But we brought in poetry. We would get melodic or whatever, or more accessible. And we brought in some text. What I found, there were a lot of folks who, if we hadn't brought in a text, they would have just never come back. But what worked, the way I analyzed it, was that it's sort of, the text made you use both sides of your brain. You've got the music going, total nonverbal, that part of the brain, and then all of a sudden there's text. And I think it intrigued people. And my idea is that people want to be intrigued. People want to be intrigued, and they want to use their whole brain. They want to use it all. And so they appreciate that, you know. Also, it's the way we used to talk about it was, so what is a competition? And some people are thinking, well, competition is this band or that band or that kind of music. I always felt the competition is television. Oh. And the only way that you can really be, if you really want to build an audience, you have to be as powerful as television. In other words, you have to be what I think people want, what I think people are geared to, and this would make sense evolutionarily. We're geared to the theater. That's what we're used to. And what's the theater? It's the motion, it's the visuals, it's the sound, it's the music, it's all of it. You know, and over time, we can get into politics of it, but over time, you know, everything gets narrowed, categorized, in order to
specialized.
Right, in order to commodify it, right? Yeah. But in terms of what we want, I think, you know, mentally, psychologically, inside we're not that way completely yet. You know, we want the pre-commodity experience, and that's everything. And so it seems as a musician, as you hit the stage, so to me it was important, just like the art ensemble. I mean, what they brought to it, and that was one of our big models, actually. That was, you know, it's like the music was top-notch, but it wasn't just the music. You had to see them. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're seeing them, you're hearing the music, and you never know when they might put a little theatrical twist on it. That's huge. I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, and people wanted it. People ate that up. I mean, the people I don't know.
Well, it's still that way, from my understanding. I mean, they still have a powerful influence.
Right.
You know, on generations coming.
But it doesn't seem anybody's doing it. Well, nobody has reached that level of success doing it anyway. But there's a tendency not to do it because, I mean, the constant narrowing of categories, and, you know, it makes it harder. I mean, we're constantly in a struggle with sort of diluting the imagination, and, you know, and people not wanting to take chances, and, you know, people wanting to make big money as opposed to enough money, you know, and you have to make your peace with that. Is it, do you want enough or do you want big? And you and I, of course, we've chosen.
Yes, it's very true. Yes,
enough money, you know, and but you can do more with enough money than you can with big money, because big money has you, as far as I'm concerned, probably playing somebody else's game. So
yeah. So there's your very first group, and then when did the United Front come in? Were there other groups you were working with as well at the time, or?
Well, there was a group actually. We started. It was briefly. It's called Marron. that lasted. We tried to hang together for about a year. It had some good people in it. But my main thing, the Brujeria, was really the seed for United Front, because Richard moved away So Breweria had 3 horns and a drummer in search of a bass player. Then it became George and me, 2 horns, Carl on drums in search of a bass player, which we found in Mark Izu.
Oh yeah, all right.
And so there we were, United Front.
And how long did you work with United Front for?
United Front, we were together about 6 years, I would say, something like that. And we were with Carl was the first drummer, and then Anthony Brown became the drummer. And yeah, that was the story there.
Yeah. And when did your current project, Music at Large, come into being?
Music at Large as what is it? It was a production series, whatever we would call it. Yeah. That started actually sort of in between Breweria and United Front.
Oh, okay, all right.
Because that back then, we're talking the 70s. Mm-hmm. The energy was up all around, and including my own energy. And I started doing well. I mean, I've always wanted to do the same things, and it's just like, how do you make it happen? And finding people who are simpatico, okay, and and trying not to wait for it to happen, but to do something, keep it moving. Right. Wow, And so with Music at Large, I started doing things, duet series, some productions where I would involve some more theater, and I used to work with a lot more dancers in it. So I mean, it started out basically as a production series designed for interdisciplinary things. So just it's about the music is going to be central, but you don't know what else is going to be with it. It could be poetry, could be dance, could be theater, it could be all of those. And so that's Music at Large's history, or the beginning of it. Most recently, it's mainly been about music. Although if I'm on it, I'm usually going to bring words, so we know it's going to be music and poetry at least. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you sometimes produce Music at Large with other musicians where you're not playing in that, or?
I don't think that's ever happened.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. No.
So if you're in it, that's where we're gonna get some poetry. That's what you were saying. So.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's interesting because this when I was thinking about when I began working on the piece for this, I was thinking, should I be in poetry? This festival seems like one maybe where it should be sort of straight up music. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, that might be. However, my tendency is to always incorporate words, and so I think I'll stay true to my tendency. So.
Well, that's good. The summit's really about what you want to do.
That's what I figured.
You want to bring in.
That's what I figured.
Yeah.
I mean, that's interesting because a lot of times you get a gig and you think, okay, what do they want us to do here? How should we shape our repertoire? And a lot of times you do that,
Well, I was inspired by the quartet that you had at the Cinmat show 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. And my first effort was to bring that group. That didn't work out. Couldn't get everybody committed to the time slot who was on that one. So I went a different route. Yeah, that would have been. I wouldn't have what I've composed for this. I would not have composed for that group. Okay, but that's only normal. If you're working with different people and you're creating it, why shouldn't it be a different composition?
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that is to me why you're composing. You're composing to create the best chance of success for the people you're working with, not for. I mean, there are obviously composers who they compose a piece. Well, I'll have this many and this, and they don't know who's going to play it, you know. And even if you can get work like that, that's fine. but that's not my orientation. No.
Wow. Okay. So, do you know what? Can you tell us what you're planning for Summit this year, or is it going to be a surprise?
It doesn't have to be a surprise. I mean, you and me and whoever else will know. Well, I'm playing music and poetry.
Right.
You know the personnel.
Yeah, and your work. So we've got India Cook and Carl Evangelista.
Right.
Carlos Perez.
No.
Oh wait.
John Carlos Perea.
John Carlos Perez. Yeah.
John Perea.
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 Okay. All right.
John Carlos Perea and Jimmy Biala.
Right. You added the drummer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Jimmy plays percussion. Well, anything that makes rhythm, apparently he plays. So he and I will have to get together, or he'll have to decide. Somehow we'll have to decide what he's going to do. Whether he's mainly going to be a percussionist or a drummer. Right at this point, I'm thinking a drummer and with percussion, but that's just stall. That's categories again because whatever's there, he's going to make rhythm with it and do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Great. Wow.
So the title is interesting. If I were going to talk about it, if we still have time to talk
we have
about
time, yeah.
The title of it is Only Children. And so that probably, when you hear that title, you probably think of one or two or three things. And basically I'm trying to, it's just about finished, create a piece that sort of evokes I can't say evokes childhood, that's not like that, but and I try not to get too far away from childhood. And the music, I think in a way there's certain elements in it that I definitely felt were more, for lack of a better word, childlike. Okay, so where in another context I might have filtered those out of, I didn't in this case. I said, okay, that can work in this piece. And it's interesting. In the process of coming up with it, some of Albert Ayler came to mind. I'm thinking, if you talk about childlike, I mean, some of his, sometimes he's like, well, don't listen for the melody, just listen for the catharsis or whatever you want to call it. And then other times, whoa, I mean, that's a triad, a triad, a triad, a triad. And it's fine because it's, So anyway, there's a spirit there. I mean, I like to think that the spirit of Albert is in my playing, whatever the circumstance. But there's certain that aspect of his playing definitely came to this composition.
So it'll be a premiere.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. There'll be 3 premieres that night, so it's a night of premieres.
How many shows are going to be?
Yeah, well,
it's a triple bill?
You'll also be joined by Kyle Bruckman's Rack, who's going to do world premiere of compositions, and I'm bringing to the table this year for the first time a set of compositions written called The Proceedings of Dr. K. So it's a unpublished science fiction from a Jungian psychologist. So it's going to be quite a wild ride for folks on the closing night of the summit this year.
It's triple bill, right?
Triple bill.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it'll be a lot of fun. Yeah. So I really look forward to hearing you, and I hope that folks that are catching this this broadcast of In the Field before someone get a chance to check things out and come to the show and hear you play and experience your music. I appreciate you coming to talk to me.
All right. My pleasure.
All right.